to bring to you a very, very interesting and candid conversation right here. But let me remind all our delegates that it's your questions that make our sessions so interactive. So please do send in your questions, and I'm sure our speakers will be more than happy to address a few of them. I'd also like to request you to please continue sharing your thoughts on your social media, and do remember to use our hashtag ETNetZero as we look forward to your responses on our survey for now in conversation on reducing carbon emissions to zero by 2050. It is such a pleasure as I present to you Mr. Nitin Prasad, Country Chairman, Shell Companies in India. And it's an absolute honor as I extend a very warm welcome to Ambassador Manjeev Singh Puri, Distinguished Fellow at Science and Climate Change, TERI. We welcome both of you.
So, Isha, thank you. Can we take on from here onwards?
Absolutely. Please do so.
Thank you very much. Isha, let me begin first by thanking the Economic Times and thanking you and Joshna in particular for focusing on what I believe is the transformative agenda for India. Now, you have been using the figure 2050. The Honorable Prime Minister announced that India would be net zero by 2070, very much so, rightly so, in keeping with our development space requirements. Now, this is a very important session in my understanding, and it's an important session because it brings us to two specific points. One is this discussion on net zero. And here I must say that, of course, Mr. Nitin Prasad, chairing as he is Shell India, a company which is global, but also very, very strong in India, brings both the global and the local perspective. Now, they are a company which understood and figured out that net zero emissions is going to be the order of the day. And in fact, I'm very proud that they associated themselves with TERI several months back and asked us to produce a study on whether this was possible, etc. That's a study that we'll talk about if we have the time a little later. But I really want to mention one thing. This, to my mind, is a session which brings, if I may use that expression, global to local. Secondly, it's a session which brings the transformative institution right on the forefront. And why do I say that? Mr. Prasad, you will agree that in various ways, the last 100 years, not 200, the last 100 years of the modern civilization, our industrialization, has been powered by hydrocarbons, and your company, of course, has been in the forefront. Now, as at least India opens up its door to gas, it does seem that the closing window at least can be seen, if not in the near future. However, I do believe there's a role because there are not just long-term targets, but there are near-term requirements. And for that, the relative shift itself will become very important and indeed absolutely critical. So I want to hear from you various things which you possibly are doing, bringing global to local, and in terms of what you might be doing in terms of really the technological shift, the innovations which are possible. And my specific questions are in the context of newer fuels. Again, taking you back to the transformative angle, green hydrogen is one of the things that we are looking at. So I want to hear a little bit from you because I think this is the meat of what is going to happen in terms of transformation. Before I give you the screen, let me also make one point. Till today, most of us generally looked at companies like yours that fueled our transport needs. And some of us realized that you also fueled power plants. Not much in India, but certainly globally. But I think most of us need to internalize that you will soon be at the heart, or I hope you will be at the heart of powering the change in industry, including in what we call hard to abate sectors. Because without your cooperation with them, whether it's cement, steel, etc., whether it's through electrification or through doing something else replaces that great element, carbon, which has helped us in the last 200 years, but where the sell-by date may have just come. So, Mr. Prasad, pleasure to have you on the screen. Great to have Shell here with us, and the screen is yours.
Well, thank you very much to the ET team and Isha and many others who have made this happen. And a very warm welcome and a good evening to you, Ambassador Puri. And thank you very much for laying the stage out, in terms of where we are. Perhaps maybe just to open up the discussion, there has been a lot of sort of, discussion about, and some of the things you talked about in terms of talking about a disruption for companies like ourselves. I think one of the things that we do need to come back and understand is that, as Shell, we have never seen ourselves as oil and gas companies. We have seen ourselves as an energy company that for the last 140 years have been in various forms of energy, and frankly, that form of energy has been in transition over the many decades that we have been a part of. You can think back to the predominance of alternative sources compared to oil and gas, the dominance of oil, the emergence of gas, the emergence of cheaper oil with shale. You can see that there's an energy system that has been in transition, and Shell has been engaged on all forms of energy sources and providing that energy to the range of different sectors and consumers in its many avatars. We were one of the first people in solar. We were one of the first people in hydrogen and wind, and this is back in the 1980s and 1990s. In fact, at one point in time, we had 15% market share in solar panels in the world, and thankfully, we're not in that business at this point in time. So we are in that transition. But what does this mean for us as we go forward? I'd like to characterize two different elements. The first is what happens in our product portfolio, and then what happens in our capabilities. And I think both are incredibly important. In our product portfolio, of course, we must come back and do two different things. One is to accelerate the commercial deployment of the commercially ready solutions today. So whether it's renewables as it stands, electromobility, biofuels, these are commercially ready solutions. We must accelerate their adoption and build the business models around them. We also must take a range of what I would suggest are lower TRL technologies. We know the technologies, but they're not yet ready for commercialization. They need to go through a cycle of demonstration and learnings and then to be able to scale up, whether it's green hydrogen, carbon capture, utilization and storage, various other sort of solutions that we can think about by sectors that we need to come back for example, sustainable aviation fuels and others. And those are the things that we now need to technologically advance at a pace that frankly has not been seen before in terms of getting them ready. But let me jump to the other point that's really important. What needs to also change fundamentally as an organization. One for ourselves is understanding that digital is going to be an incredibly important part of this transition. It is frankly the glue, the integration glue for how we can actually decarbonize our sectors and how we can even track and measure and understand how we're going to run our businesses going forward. So we must adopt a digital mindset as we go forward and deeply integrate that. We have to understand that what is going to be dominant in moving forward is the sense of customer choice and flexibility. So a customer should be able to come back and choose whether they want to run a hydrogen vehicle, an electric vehicle, a gas-powered vehicle, a biofuel-powered vehicle, and they want those, and they don't want to be suggested that one answer is the silver bullet that's there. And we have to be able to give them that flexibility. That requires us to be, as an energy company, much more in a customer back mode, much more consumer facing, much more customer back, and understanding how these sectors are going to evolve and take a sector orientation to what we come back and do. We must be a catalyst for change and an accelerant, if you will, in terms of how we come and take that forward, because these technologies require us to share, what are some of the understandings we have. For example, offshore wind as a case in point. We understand the offshore dynamics better than most in the world as a sector. And that's going to require us to bring that to bear as we go forward. And so we must see ourselves as an accelerant for change in terms of what we're doing. And the last point I'll say is that this is all going to require transformative collaboration amongst a range of different stakeholders that traditionally have not sat together. We have, of course, worked very closely with our suppliers and our customers, but now it is time for us to work very closely with regulators, with think tanks, with NGOs, and in all forms of sectors in society to be able to take the societal structures forward that we need to be able to decarbonize our countries.
Nitin, thank you very much. This was really perfect because, you were very prescient. If you will allow me to say so, when you land in any of the airports in Delhi, in India, from anywhere overseas, The aero bridges are full of one of your competitors advertising that we are not just an oil and gas company, but an energy company. You said it all very well. I must also compliment you for, looking at innovation and interaction, because I think innovation is certainly going to be the key to it. Look, I mentioned to you that this very hard and wonderful element, carbon, has changed our lives. I mean, if we can look back 6, 7 generations back, things couldn't have been the way they are today. The kind of dreams that we have wouldn't have been possible. But maybe it has reached its sell-by date. And now we need to try and do some change. But is the change really so easily possible? Just dump, move to the other? No. We will have to go through both a transition as well as in terms of innovation. And the innovation is both on the market side as well as in terms of technological development. You made another very important point, and I think in India, this is the point of criticality. Although we talk a lot about finance, but being the kind of economy we are, we might just be able to square ourselves on that. But on the issue of technological cooperation, collaboration, in fact, I think that's the absolute critical element. I referred to this, and you, of course, are very familiar, the TERI Shell study. And what did it say? Of course, it made mention that, we need to ramp up the use of solar air power, we need to ramp up wind energy. But it then also spoke about doing a great deal on carbon capture, storage, and usage if possible. And frankly speaking, the global situation there is that while the technologies might appear that they are there, but frankly, they really haven't been used in anything in a demonstrable manner. Now, there again, I think there's something very important for us to look at. Next comes the question of costs. I mean, of course, these things cost. But the way I look at it is, let's look at the costs as we incur them today and compare them with possible benefits, including looking at the simple fact that we are looking at keeping our planet sustainable and keeping ourselves going as humanity. So Shell, in my opinion, has a particularly important role in India globally, but also as an incubator of change and an incubator of technology. Let me leave this thought with you as you come back to the screen, but also leave 2 specific points. What do you think about ideas in which Shell can contribute on things such as resource efficiency, circular economy? These are particularly important for a developing country like India, and not only us. I'm sure it's important in Indonesia, it's important in Nigeria. It's going to be very, very important in most of Africa, in fact, the next sort of big growth engine that we are going to see. So I'd like to hear from you, because again, as I said, you are those people who are in a position to bring global to local all over the world.
No, thank you, Ambassador Puri. And you mentioned 2 points on resource efficiency and material efficiency and of course, circular economy. So let me build on that a little bit. Absolutely essential for us to talk about net zero and in both of these 2 criteria. Now, if I break this out a little bit, actually our industry in India has been actually quite energy efficient. And this has a lot to do with the things like the PAT schemes and other that we have rolled out. And if you take a look and benchmark our industrial activity, they have seen the economic benefits of energy efficiency, waste heat recovery, and so forth. More can be done, but I would come back and suggest that in energy efficiency, we are actually quite a bit down the road. The next wave of that is, of course, back to the digitalization story, to actually come back in automation and to adopt the next, the tool sets that are going to take it forward. Material efficiency, I think, is where we are actually sorely lacking. And I think that is a space where we need to really focus in. We did some waste characterization work for the Delhi municipal, the Delhi landfills. And what comes out is that 50% of this is actually construction material. And the remaining 50 of 8,000 tons per day, roughly, of waste is actually the organic material that gets wasted. Now, that 50% of construction material is a pure waste in terms of what is going into a landfill dump. And we are not efficient in terms of how we are coming back and using this. Back to the point on what do we do with the remaining 50% of organic material, this is where I think we have to come back and appreciate that whether it is municipal solid waste in our industrial dumps, whether it is our agricultural waste, whether it is our used cooking oils, whether it is a number of different sources, we actually have the technology now to process these things and to convert them into other forms of either transportation fuels or into oils that we can further process into plastics, and the solutions are available. So what we need to come back and do is to actually structure these circular chains and effectively come in and be able to rebuild them, to be able to capture some of those benefits and to utilize the technologies that exist for us to be much more circular in our nature. And I think the more that we are able to do this and to get different other sectors to come and play along, that's just on the bio side. I think there are even more examples as you start to think about steel and others as we go forward. One last point I'd like to sort of come and make is, which you referred to, is about the cost of these technologies. And we must be really clear that we are trying to compare new next generation technologies at a cost point to what has been a multiple decades worth of cost efficiency that we have brought in our existing technologies. And that is apples to oranges. They will not match up. And we cannot expect new technology on day one to be cheaper. But what is possible is for us to think about how do we do the new value chains, the new sharing of some of those costs and the new premiums, and how do we engage a customer and consumer base who does want to be greener in their nature. By the time that if you take green steel and cost it out, there has been work that has been done, with our colleagues, in the Energy Transition Commission, with TERI also along the way, that demonstrate that the cost of a car with green steel is about 100 to 200 euros more expensive. Now, for a 15,000 or 10,000 euro car, that I would suggest that is a pittance. But how do you take that 100, 200 euros and pass that down the chain to ensure that everybody then is playing their green role, if you will? That is the fundamental problem that we have to sort of come back and solve. So I think that there is a potential here for us to think about how we do this and to engage customers and consumers in terms of making their choices well known as in terms of how they would like to engage with green technology.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prasad. Isha, do we have time for another question, or is this session time over? One question more. Mr. Prasad, I'm very happy to hear what you said, including the fact that, look, there is an investment to be made for the future. So let's understand and be very realistic on that. But it's an investment for the future. And what the future will do for us is a future that we will benefit, our children will benefit, etc. No issue on that. Let me take you to something about India. Look, my convinced belief is that India is absolutely excellent in taking what has been established, especially in the democratic Western world, and rolling it out in a huge manner in India. Whether we become the largest internet consumers or Facebook, etc., or mobile telephony, it's all after it was established and set up and we rolled it out. Similarly, I don't think things would change very much in the other thing. So my question to you is, and what do I see in terms of hydrocarbons in India? We talk in terms of there not being much production, much being imported. But frankly speaking, what have we done in terms of production that we were able to generate? Have we built the pipelines? The record is not so very stellar. I hope it will change. But my question to you is, what is Shell going to lead? Being a company based in Europe, a continent which speaks a lot about greening and so on. What are you doing about rolling out some of the ideas that you're talking about for India in your countries, I mean, in the Netherlands, in the UK, etc.? Because believe me, that reflective impact will be so much larger in our country here in India than perhaps the places. But the demonstration impact, I think, can be particularly important. That's the last question. I'm grateful for your time.
It's a wonderful question, but it's a question I feel like I must agree to disagree with you a little bit on this, because we have had technology development in India for the globe, and I think this has been a shift that has happened in the last 2 decades. That it is no longer the case that we should feel that we need to bring technology in and Indianize it and take it forward. Notwithstanding what has been done in other sort of sectors, my experience has been that we actually now have the capability in our own country to innovate for the rest of the world. And I think the challenges that we have in India in terms of delivering a net zero world, whether it's 2070 or frankly, I think we should be more ambitious and continue to aim for 2050. And as corporates, to be globally competitive, we will have to continue aiming for 2050. But the reality is that we are seeing technology develop in the country, and the unique journey that we have, well, it is a journey that most countries have not done, because they have gone ahead and emitted and have built legacy assets and are now turning those legacy assets into a greener assets. Whereas we still have to build our basic infrastructure as we go forward. At a minimum, our industrial activity is set to triple in the next 3 decades. In terms of what so we have to build more steel plants and more cement plants and construct more cities. That means that we're going to have to come back and do this in a low emission way from the get-go. So this is about greenfield sites built to be low carbon manufacturing in India as we go forward. And our opportunity is to come back and define on a pathway we can do this. But of course, we also have to do this in low emission. We have to do this with clean air. And we must do this in a way that we continue to create jobs and bring the economic development and the benefits of economic development to a large number of people in our population. Our challenge is unique. Our pathway, I think, is for us to discover the way to innovate our own way forward.
Thank you, Mr. Prasad. I like that. Don't repeat the mistakes of others. We have a green field in front of us. You fueled my optimism. I'm very delighted to hear that. And thank you very much to you personally, to Shell, to ET. And I hope that others listening in are paying attention to what a global leader is saying that they're doing there and here, and what here can do for there. Fantastic. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so very much, Ambassador Manjeev Singh Puri, Distinguished Fellow, Earth Science and Climate Change. TERI, it's been a pleasure listening to this very, very interesting conversation with you, along with Mr. Nitin Prasad, Chairman, Shell Companies in India, sharing those absolutely fantastic ideas there. You know, you mentioned about how one has to be more ambitious and bring their targets closer. I really do hope that you, along with your entire team at Shell, join us at our Net Zero portal, because it's organizations like you, it's leaders like you that can encourage so many more companies to really work together. And like you very rightly mentioned, it's time that one learns from mistakes of others, doesn't repeat them. So it's really about experience sharing. It's really about taking a step further into creating a better tomorrow. I thank you for your kind presence, for sharing those ideas, and this very, very interesting conversation. Both of you, it's a pleasure that you could join us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as we look forward to many, many more sessions being very engaging right here, may I once again request all of you to please participate in our survey as we get set to bring to you our CEO's dialogue on climate transition action plans, decarbonizing the business, innovation, growth, and sustainability. I'll shortly be introducing our panelists, so please do stay tuned.